Hi students, we have started to learn PLSQL programming, and in this session we are going to learn about implicit cursors used in PLSQL. Unit outcome for this particular session is create cursor for retrieving multiple records in the given situation. And learning outcome for this particular session is students should learn how to declare SQL cursor and its types such as implicit and explicit cursors. So let's discuss the concept of cursors in PLSQL. So every SQL statement that is executed by the Oracle server has an associated individual cursor. So database server or Oracle server helps us to execute SQL statements. So it requires some memory area, and that memory area is known as context area. So our cursor is a pointer to that context area. PLSQL controls the context area to a cursor. So cursor holds the rows, one or more than one record written by a SQL statement. The set of rows the cursor holds is known as the active set. So the memory area used by Oracle server or database server to execute SQL statement is nothing but context area, and cursor is nothing but the pointer to that context area, and cursor can hold one or more records, and that set of records is nothing but active set. So cursor has two types. One is an implicit cursor and the second is an explicit cursor. So implicit cursors declared and managed by PLSQL for all DML and PLSQL select statements. So DML operations like insert, update and delete. So when we execute insert, update and delete operations, at that time these implicit cursors declared and managed by PLSQL automatically. So users don't need to declare those cursors manually. Whereas in explicit cursors, this type of cursors declared and managed by the programmer. So these are the types of cursors. So now, before going to use the concept of a cursor, first we need to understand why we require cursor. For this, let's take one small example which is familiar to you. In the declare section, here one variable is there, v_lname, having data type varchar2 of 15. So here we are going to store character data in the v_lname variable. And in the begin section, you can see one select statement is there. Select last name into v_lname. So we know why we require into clause. Whatever the data which is present in the last name, that data, column data, we are going to store in that v_lname variable. From employees table, we are going to retrieve the information, but the condition is the first name is equal to John, and after taking the information, we are going to display John's last name is whatever the value which is in that variable as an output, and we are going to terminate that blank. So as we have discussed with this particular example for many times, and we know there is the possibility that organization can have multiple employees having first name as a John. So it is possible to get multiple records as an output, and we have only single variable, and our single variable is not able to store these multiple records. At that time, we may face error like too many rows. That is the implicit exception. It is Oracle predefined exception. So you can check the error report also. Exact fetch returns more than requested number of rows. So here we require such a variable which can store the values from that active set one by one, and that variable is nothing but cursor. So we can solve this type of problems, or we can handle this type of exception by using the concept of cursor. So let's discuss about implicit cursor. So whenever Oracle executes an SQL statement such as select with into plots, insert, update and delete, it automatically creates an implicit cursor. Oracle internally manages the whole of the execution cycle of implicit cursor and reveals only the cursor's information. So every cursor, whether it is implicit or explicit, it has some attributes. So with the help of those attributes, Oracle server can reveal the information. The implicit cursor is not that effective when the query returns 0 or multiple rows which cause no data found or too many rows exceptions respectively. So as we have discussed in our previous slide, there was one exception, that is too many rows. So our cursor is not that effective to handle such type of exception. So the next is about attributes of cursors and how we can operate cursors. So these cursors cannot be named and hence they cannot be controlled or referred from another place of the code. So here we are talking about implicit cursors. So this type of cursors are declared and managed by PLSQL automatically. That's why here the user is not aware of the names of those cursors. That's why user cannot control or manage these type of cursors. So we can refer only the most recent cursor through the cursor attributes. It means what? We can refer only the most recent SQL operation through the cursor attributes or impact of the recent SQL operation with the help of a cursor attributes. Both implicit and explicit cursor has certain attributes that can be accessed. These attributes give more information about the cursor operations. There are the different cursor attributes and their usage. So let's discuss one by one. The first cursor attribute is percent not found. So we have to use this percent and found for percent not found or percent found or percent is open, percent row count. These are the different cursor attributes. So we need to write as it is. That case doesn't matter, but percentage sign is required. So the first is percent found. It returns the Boolean result true if the most recent fetch operation fetch a record successfully, else it will return false. It simply means that if cursor is getting information from the SQL statement to process, at that time this particular attribute is true. Whereas percent not found attribute can work differently. This works oppositely to percent found. It will return true if the most recent fetch operation could not able to fetch any record. So suppose in the PLSQL block we are going to update some records into the table. If The update operation is performed on 4 records, so that person found is true and person not found is false. But 0 records are getting updated. That means person not found is true and person found is false. Now the next one is person is open. It returns Boolean true if the given cursor is already open, else it returns false. Means if that active set is available, that means that cursor is open. Otherwise it is not. Then person row count is very important attribute. It returns the numerical value. It gives the actual count of records that got affected by the DBML activity. So if 4 records are getting updated, that means the person row count attribute has numerical value 4. So this is how we can retrieve information about cursor or recent activity with the help of this type of attributes. So let's take one example over here. Consider table customers having columns like ID, name, age, address and salary. The following program will update the table and increase the salary of each customer by 500. So this is the problem statement. And use the SQL person row count attribute to determine the number of rows affected. So now the question is, how can we use those attributes? So you can see one important note over here. Any SQL cursor attribute will be accessed as SQL, that is keyword SQL person and attribute name for implicit cursor. So in the example, in declare section, you can see one variable total rows having data type number 2. In the begin section, one update operation is there. Update customers, set salary is equal to salary plus 500. So this set operation is SQL operation. So no colon is equal to required. So salary is equal to salary plus 500. And no where condition is there. That means we are going to update salary for all customers. Now the next is if SQL person not found, means no data is getting affected or updated, then the message will be no customer selected for update operation. If it is true, ELSI, that means here we are going to check for another condition. SQL person found. Then the next is total rows colon is equal to SQL person row count. So here we can get the information how many rows get affected or get updated with the help of a SQL person row count. And after getting that result, we can display as a total rows, that is customers selected for update operation. So if we execute this code in our workspace, so suppose 6 records are getting updated, then 6 customers selected for update operation will be the message as an output. So this is how we can use the concept of implicit cursor. So one thing that is to be noted is implicit cursors are not having any name, so we cannot control it, whereas explicit cursors can be defined by the programmer, so that is more easy to manage. So this is the limitation of the implicit cursor.